Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of entitled People. Hope you're all doing awesome today, and it's time for more Reddit stories, so let's just jump right in. So just a quick side note about this story, it's about a racetrack that the OP had built on their property. We read a post about this in another video, but this is actually a new encounter that OP had. The other video about this racetrack is down in the description, but you don't need to have heard that story for this one to make sense. Alright, here we go. Neighbor is big mad about my racetrack. Okay, so it finally happened today. Last spring, my family finally moved into our dream home. We bought the property years ago, and through the pandemic, finally were able to get our dream home built. The property is essentially in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest neighbor being about a mile down the road. On the few hundred acres we have, I tried to do my best at recreating some professional drift tracks. From Drift Masters, European Championship, and Formula Drift. We were able to create one-to-one models of Wall, New Jersey, Riga, Irwindale, California, Texas, Poland, Seattle, Englishtown, New Jersey. Everything is up to code and greenlit by the county. We plan to open a drift school on the property in the future. We've also built 6 cars to 800 horsepower, primarily using 5.3-liter Chevy V8s. The cars are an E36 BMW, E46 BMW, 96 Silvia, 13 BRZ, 15 Mustang, and a 16 MX-5. I list all of this because it is loud and smoky here on the farm a lot, and for the past 7 or 8 months we've had absolutely no issues, minus a trespasser destroying his car in our shed. That's in reference to the previous post, by the way. Today that changed. I have some family in town for the holiday, and among them are my cousin, a 39-year-old male, and his son, 17. Having grown up drifting with my cousin, I was super hyped to take his boy out and slide around the track, so we grabbed a couple of the track cars and cut loose. About 40 minutes into it, as we were swapping out tires, I hear sirens and step out of the garage. Coming down my driveway are 2 fire engines and a couple of police cars and an SUV. They all park and hop out, and I ask, how can I help them? They ask about a fire, along with noise, to which I explain the drift cars and motion to all of the racetrack around the property. I show them my county documents which allow for the racetracks, etc. At this point, my apparent neighbor, who's a male in his 50s, whom I've never met, starts yelling about the noise and how I should be arrested. The sergeant, who had shown up with the gaggle of responders, stopped him and informed him that we aren't doing anything illegal, and so long as we keep our noise to before 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends, we are within the law. Neighbor called us a bunch of degenerate inbred a-holes before turning and cussing out the sergeant. We specifically chose this property to build on, as it is zoned commercial and automotive, on top of residential. The fire department left almost as soon as they arrived. After the neighbor had his meltdown, he was trespassed by PD. A couple of the police hung around and watched us hit a few laps. I offered to take them out and teach them if they would like, free of charge. Then they too left. I come here to ask Reddit, am I the a-hole for building a giant race facility at my home, which is located in the most appropriate area one can find? Update. Neighbor just came back to knock on my door and tell me that we will no longer be racing cars on our property. Threatened to destroy the vehicles and was all but foaming at the mouth. Police came. He called them, and they immediately arrested him for trespassing. This guy is going to be a great neighbor. Edit. We do have trail cams all around the property. No one can get in without being seen. There are numerous inside the property too. Thanks for all the concern. You know, I don't really think OP is an a-hole for doing this. He's following all the zoning regulations, and he doesn't make any noise during the quiet hours. So from a legal standpoint, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. But let's just take a second to look at it from the angry guy's perspective. Maybe before OP moved in and built this racetrack, it was a very quiet neighborhood. And then one day you start seeing smoke and screeching tires on maybe a weekly basis. So I think the neighbor isn't totally wrong for feeling maybe a bit irritated about it, at the most. But for him to just go off like that and throw a tantrum and get arrested for trespassing, yeah, he is at fault for that. Oh, and also threatened to destroy OP's property. So I'm not trying to justify how this neighbor is acting at all, I'm just trying to see where he might be coming from. So sure, maybe now the neighborhood is a bit more noisy during the day, but there's not much you can really do about that. Especially since the area is zoned commercial and automotive. You gotta kind of expect that this stuff can happen. Real quick guys, before we move on to the next one, if you're enjoying this content and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to do so. Just give that subscribe button a friendly little poke. Anyway, moving on. An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30-year-old male and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex, with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall? Etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache, and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head, and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain, and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees, and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine, neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized, and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency, and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station, and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of my ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell, and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine, you don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back window was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer, and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates. Small update. My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face, from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. Update. Hey everyone, sorry for the late update. Unfortunately, it's not as exciting as some of you would hope for. So I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said that the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information, unless something happens again. I read a majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact elder abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say that they are abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living their best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, then that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can pretty much be applied about elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbor was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion for any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in more of an inconsiderate way, and not in an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of an a-hole. I am, however, hoping that the patient presses charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. Sell me your house. A couple of years ago, my husband and I bought a house from the city council. We had seen it and we loved everything about it and the neighborhood. Inspection showed that apart from the central heating boiler, everything was in good order. We still needed to replace the central heater boiler. We also renovated the bathroom and stairs, and we placed a new kitchen. Between then and now, we have invested money in our home. Amongst other things, we placed solar panels, renovated the front and back garden, and renovated our downstairs toilet. For reference, we have lived here for around 6 years now, and we have no intention on moving. Apart from the fact that we pumped a lot of money into the house, we love the neighborhood, our neighbors, and the fact that we are close to family and friends. The way the council sold houses went as follows. The house was up for sale for 6 weeks. If you were interested, you could schedule a visit with a real estate agent, place a bid if you wanted, and then after 6 weeks, the city council would look at all the bids and see who offered the most. 2 weeks ago, I was home when a lady rang the doorbell. She introduced herself and told me that when the house came up for sale all those years ago, she and her husband were interested. They could see the potential, but their bid was rejected. She was enthused about how it looked now, from what she could see, and how beautiful the garden was, how wonderful the solar panels were and such. So I thanked her for her compliments and waited for the reason why she rang the doorbell. She told me that since they had more money saved, she and her husband wanted to know if we were interested in selling them the house. I told her that we were not interested. She started whining and gave an offer, and I told her the same, not interested at all. More whining ensued, and she made a new offer. I kindly drew the line and said that she can offer all she wants. We love living here and we want to enjoy our home with the family we've built in it. Then I told her that I had things to do, wished her a good day, and closed the door. I had barely turned around when she started ringing the doorbell continuously, so I opened the door and asked her what she needed to say. She told me this, almost verbatim. "You need to sell us this house. You have lived here for some years now. My husband and children deserve a nice house like this. I gave you 2 offers that are very reasonable. It's our turn now, so sell us the house. We want to live here." I told this woman that her offers were laughable. She gave 2 offers while we knew that we could ask for double the price and get that still. She lowballed. I reiterated that we were not interested and would not sell the house. I asked her to leave and closed the door again. Like before, she started ringing the doorbell like a madwoman. After trying to ignore it, I ripped open the front door and shouted in her face for her to get lost. We are not interested. Even if we were, I would not sell my house to her since she's acting like a spoiled brat. I wouldn't want my neighbors to deal with her spoiled attitude. I told her that she doesn't need to think about trying to bully us into moving, and to get the f away or I would call the police. This time I slammed the door to get the message across. She stayed, screaming at the door that we have to sell the house to her, and walked around a bit before leaving. I did send a message in our Streets group app about her. People have said to keep an eye out for her. My husband was stunned when I told him this, as this is not a normal thing in our country to do. She has been seen once or twice, but has not caused any problems for us or anyone else. It's pretty hilarious that this person tried to argue that it's her turn to have the house. And the idea of going to the house and just asking the owner if they might be interested in selling, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But she obviously took it way too far. And I'm sure most of us are aware too that there are actually people like this. When they get told no and don't get what they want, they just turn into absolute children. It's honestly pretty hilarious though when you're not the one having to deal with it. Guys, that is it for today's totally insane and entitled humans. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, and be sure to subscribe for more. Also, comment down below and tell me what you thought of the stories. Anyway, friends, I'm out of here. So have an awesome day, take care, stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.